All right, let's do this. Hi, my name is Richard.lesperance. I go by the name of my man Richard. Welcome to a better lifestyle. Today I have Shihan Sheriff with me. He's doing great work in the finance world and the accounting world. So I think you guys are gonna like this episode. So please, Shihan, tell everybody your story. Who is Shihan? And we'll start from there.
Sure. Thank you very much, Richard, for firstly having me on your show. I see you've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of interesting stuff in terms of in your YouTube channel and all of them. I watched a lot of those videos. I found it very useful. I'm sure most of your audience is finding it the same. So, in terms of an introduction about myself, yes, I'm Shihan Sheriff. I work here as in Dubai as the Chief Financial Officer for the Sanjay Group, as well as the Vice President of Finance for Nomad. Aside in terms of my hobbies, I was really interested in terms of personal development and learning in terms of finance and accounting. So I published my first book last year in July by the name of Accounting Fundamentals. It thankfully achieved the bestseller ranking a couple of times. Even yesterday, it was ranked as the number one bestseller on Amazon for the particular category. So since then, I've been on a few podcast shows like yours, and I've also started my own podcast recently called the Money Master HQ Show. I just did a few episodes recently. So it's been an interesting time in terms of my career, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any of your questions and something that's useful to your audience to be provided as well.
Okay, so let's talk about the book. What inspired you to write the book, and what's the book all about?
Yes, so throughout my career, since I started around 18 years ago, I came across a lot of different people who, a lot of businessmen, entrepreneurs, as well as people into various other professions like into marketing, HR, and so on, who find numbers difficult to be understood. And as a result, they tend to make wrong business decisions, wrong personal choices as well in terms of their own personal finances. And I found that this is probably an area that I could help them with. And given my passion in finance and accounting, I thought, let me publish this book. And I also went through a very difficult period in my life over the last few years, so that really inspired me to write this book. I've also taken a lot of courses, over 200 online courses, including Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, Alex Hormozi, Brendan Burchard, and so on. So those speakers motivated me further as well. So I was all in to help people with whatever I could in terms of the resources, expertise, and skills that I possess. So I thought this was the best time to do it. And COVID also was during this period over the last few years. So a lot of negativity around the world, but I kept myself positive, and I thought, let me do what I can to help make the world a better place.
So can you touch a little bit about what you teach in the book?
Yeah. So in the book, the book title is Accounting Fundamentals: A Non-Finance Manager's Guide to Finance and Accounting. So we start with the very basics of finance and accounting. So from the history of accounting to from where it has evolved to where it is today, then the differences between finance and accounting. Then we also go into the very basic financial terms, even to the extent of what is meant by assets, liabilities, equity, and so on. And then we go on to understand what different aspects of finance and accounting, such as budgeting, management accounting, taxation basics. And we also end the book with a blueprint that any non-finance manager can implement in their organization, as well as a lot of useful tips to implement in their personal lives as well. So, for example, as a non-finance manager, if we take a marketing manager, the marketing manager would be responsible for the marketing spends of the company, looking at the effectiveness of that marketing spend. So if you don't have any idea of finance and accounting, you wouldn't exactly know how that amount is being spent. For example, there could be an advance paid to a marketing firm, but whether you should consider that advance paid as part of your marketing spend that's already taken place or not. Very simple things like that. So, by reading this book, it will help such people to be guided in terms of learning those basics, as well as then help them make better informed business decisions. So
So,
that's what the book covers in a nutshell.
so why you think it's important for people to know about finance and accounting?
Yes, so very good question, Richard. So throughout my career, I've come across a lot of people who've made wrong business decisions just due to the lack of knowledge in finance and accounting. I've even come across certain businessmen who've eventually gone bankrupt because of this. So they tend to make wrong business decisions in terms of not knowing their cash flow. So if there's a payment that's due to be paid to a creditor or a supplier next week, next month, they wouldn't, and if they don't know what their bank balance is as of today and have a forecast ready, you could fall into all sorts of problems. It's like if you think of your own personal life, there are a number of people who fall into the trap of credit card debt, by not knowing how to forecast their cash flows accurately. So there's a very famous quote of Warren Buffett, where he said, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." So things like that are very good tips for anyone to know and to practice in their own lives. So these are the things that we cover in the book, and I think these are important things that anyone should know, because if you don't know your finances, you're in trouble. Warren Buffett also said the language of business is accounting. So that's the importance and significance of learning this area. So it's not, I mean, a lot of businessmen and entrepreneurs think that, finance and accounting is a job for the accountants or the finance managers to do. But that's not the case, because if, as a businessman, if you're running a business and you don't know where you stand, you don't know what you're achieving in terms of your gross margins, you don't know what you're earning in terms of revenue, you don't have a feel of what you achieved last year versus this year, very basics of those comparisons and variances, you could fall into trouble and you wouldn't know which direction your business is heading. So it's really critical that anyone knows. I mean, I'm not just saying it for the sake of it, but if you even think of your own personal lives, you would realize that how important it is to know what your upcoming expenses are versus your salary or other income is, and then identify how you're going to bridge that gap, or if, I hope there is no gap, but in terms of savings, that you first save and then spend the money. So these are all important elements and aspects that one will need to consider.
So talk to us about the basic concepts of finance and accounting.
Yes, so finance and accounting is based on the principle of assets equals liabilities plus equity. I know this may sound Greek to a lot of different people, but this is the very essence of the equation of finance. So you might be hearing the terms of, balancing the books. So that's based on assets equals liabilities plus equity. So if I just explain this or elaborate on this further, which is also explained in very much detail in the book. So assets means anything that you as a person or a business owns, anything that you own. So it can be cash, your cash balance in the bank, or any other assets such as motor vehicles, jewelry, and so on. So if it's a business, it could be inventory, any amounts that are owed to you by your trade debtors, and other loans that you may have granted to anyone, so which is due to you. So these are all part of your assets. Those actually belong to you. On the other side, of the equation, we've got liabilities. So what are liabilities? These are amounts that are owed to external parties. So for example, if you've borrowed something from someone, you need to pay it back. This is an amount that you owe somebody. So that's a liability. Likewise, if you've taken goods on credit from suppliers, that's an amount that you owe the supplier. So that's a liability. And likewise, there are various different liabilities, but you get the idea. Then when it comes to equity, it's the amount that's left after you pay off the liabilities. So it's your own investments that you've made in the business over the years. So if you take assets minus liabilities, that's what you're left with, and that's equity. So if you've invested $100,000 into your own business, on one side, that's an asset, that's a cash balance. On the other side, that's equity of your business. So at any given transaction, if you consider it with the accounting equation, the equation would hold true. And that's how accounting and finance is based on, in terms of the debits and credits and all the entries that are being posted, and in terms of building up the balance sheet. So that's in essence the foundation of finance and accounting. But as a finance and accounting student way back during my school career, I found this so confusing. I found it's the one of the reasons was because that I fell sick during the first term of school in that particular year in which the subject was introduced. And if you miss the initial introduction of any subject, not only finance and not only accounting, you'd find it really hard because everything is built on that initial foundation, right? So I wasn't able to attend those lectures in the first few weeks, and then I found this so Greeky, in the subsequent terms. I then attended certain private lessons, which then helped me to learn. But I find this being the issue with a lot of different people across my career. They find it very difficult to understand just these basics. So if you understand the basics, then building on the basics is always very easy. So that's what I would say.
One of the main problems businesses have is cash flow. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I think a lot of businesses don't understand where they stand in terms of their cash flow. So, not doing the cash flow projections is one critical area. People tend to get busy with their day-to-day lives. Things are moving so fast. For that matter, we are already in March. During this year, time flies. So you tend to get stuck and lost in the day-to-day world, whereas finance professionals as well as non-finance professionals, business owners need to be more proactive. They need to have a cash flow projection in place, which I find a lot of businesses lacking. Yes, a company like Apple, which has billions of dollars in excess cash flow, wouldn't have this issue. But for a vast majority of 90% plus businesses around the world, which consist primarily of small to medium-sized businesses, would definitely face this issue. And particularly during tough times as these, we've seen a few banks go bankrupt in the US and around the world as well. So it's tough times. Cost of living is high, inflation is super high. So it all comes down to cash flow. During these tough times, so cash flow projections is a must for any business to do. The next aspect that I see that's lacking is in terms of your monthly accounting. Not many business owners or entrepreneurs review those financials. It's an absolute must that every business owner, entrepreneur reviews their monthly financial accounts and gets an understanding of where they stand versus the previous month versus the previous year, and then make certain business decisions at that moment rather than waiting for the end of the financial year and then deciding, oh, I've lost this much of money. Whereas so much of action, so much of decisions that could have been taken well in advance to avoid that huge or heavy losses at the end of the financial year. So the moment you review your financials, you'll find a lot of questions, and those questions will lead you to take better decisions and eventually good answers. So that's where that's another area where most business owners and entrepreneurs, as well as non-finance managers, could be of use. And another aspect is, I think I already mentioned this, but to elaborate and answering your question here, is I feel if there is knowledge amongst non-finance managers, that can always help them to question accountants and finance managers. I know a lot of accountants will not like this, but imagine your entire organization is fully conversant with the finances of your organization. There's so much more collective decision making that can go into making better decisions in terms of expanding your business, in terms of looking at increasing your sales for the business. If that common understanding is there, it will make life so much easier. Plus, it will also keep your accounting and finance teams on their toes, so that there are no mistakes that are being made. Even if there are mistakes, they are rectified as soon as possible, and they are not costly. So yeah, these are the three basic important elements that I would like to highlight, for any business owner, business entrepreneur to take a look at.
I think you talk about in your book Business Success Blueprint. Can you talk about that?
Yes, that's the last chapter of the book, and that's the critical chapter that I just mentioned at the start of my session here today. That is very important in terms of a checklist for any business owner and entrepreneur to take a look at. But in order to gain an understanding of that particular chapter, the book is based on the foundation. So if you start from the beginning and then follow chapter by chapter, you'll then have a proper understanding on how to implement this blueprint which is mentioned right at the end. I've broken it down into several segments in terms of, looking at different financial statements, to understanding how the ratio analysis stuff are done in your organization. So when I say ratio analysis, just to elaborate this to any non-finance manager for their understanding, it basically takes your financial statements and compares various metrics and does some calculations in terms of, so if I give an example, gross profit margin. So how much percentage is your gross profit as a percentage of revenue? So basically it's gross profit divided by revenue. Versus if you've got any competitive data, how does your business stand in comparison to that business? So these are things that you could easily implement in any organization, but yet not many organizations implement them. Particularly the small to medium-sized businesses I'm talking of. Yes, the large corporates, they have automated systems and ERPs and so on and so forth. But it's a majority of these small business owners who don't get into these practices, which could be super critical and useful if they implemented. So I've mentioned this as the last chapter of the book, but yet it's important to follow through each chapter by chapter, starting from the very basics.
What if someone says, I don't have to worry about that, my accountant is going to take care of it?
That's exactly the wrong way to approach it, and for several reasons. That's one thing that I just mentioned a little while ago, that if the non-accountants also had a better understanding of the finance and accounting function, making that collective decision would be so much easier. Plus, it doesn't happen in all organizations. Most people are great, but there are a few bad eggs, right, in every basket. So, for example, if an accountant commits a fraud, which also happens in a lot of organizations, so how would you catch that? How would you know that? It's all hard-earned money, and if just by not knowing the basics of finance and accounting, you wouldn't be able to identify such criminal offenses that are being carried out. So if you just had that basic understanding, you'll be able to identify things like that happening well in advance before it's too late, and take appropriate action. So these are just very few basic examples, but it goes well beyond that and impacts the organization's entire direction and success in the long run.
You're doing a lot of stuff. You have the Money Master. I think you're a VP for that, and I think you're CFO for a company, Isanjo, something like that. You're doing a lot of stuff. What's your involvement in all these ventures that you're doing right now?
So I'm working in a full-time employment. I've been with this company since 2010. I moved to Dubai in 2008. So I'm, like you said, I'm the CFO of the Isanjo group of companies, as well as the vice president of finance for a company called Nomod. So in terms of the businesses that are that we work for, so it's Isanjo is basically a group of companies in trading and investments. We've got a number of different subsidiaries there, starting off with private, public equity, real estate, joint venture investments to general trading. And also we handle the accounting of certain other customers. And when it comes to Nomod, it's a payment service provider, or at least facilitates payment services. So we basically have an app by the name of Nomod, and customers or businesses are able to just simply download that app, go through a set of questions in terms of the KYCs, and then proceed with accepting payments from their customers. So payment links to in-person payments and so on. So it's basically replacing the credit card machine. Instead of that, they just have to use, instead of the POS machine, they just have to use the mobile phone. And a lot of businesses have found this to be very useful, user friendly, and easy to use. You don't have to pay hefty deposits to get approval to accept credit card payments. And the KYC procedure is very easy. Of course, on the back end, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into it. But from a customer's perspective or from a merchant's perspective, it's very easy to sign up. And the growth since inception has been phenomenal. We have received investments from Y Combinator. We are a Y Combinator backed company, and the business continues to do great things in terms of product features. We tend to improve it a lot every month on month. So my role here at all these organizations is to be responsible and manage the overall finances and accounting function of the group.
So when it comes to accounting and finance, what about taxation?
Yes, taxation is a very important area, because if you avoid taxes or, undercalculate the taxation amount that's due to the government, you could end up in deep trouble. Even a day's delay beyond the deadline could be detrimental in terms of the fines, because they are very heavy. No government wants to be paid late, and the compliance requirements are very strict on how you file the taxes as well, not just the payment. And here in Dubai, corporate taxation has been introduced since June last year for financial periods beginning on or after 1st June. And I think throughout the world, in most countries, taxation has been established many years ago. And if not only in terms of corporate taxes, but even in terms of individual taxes, it's very important to plan early. So failing to plan is planning to fail, right? I mean, we've all heard that quote number of times. So, and it's particularly true when it comes to taxation. You have to plan your taxation early. You have to take a look at your revenues, your expenses, your assets, your liabilities, and plan it. I mean, of course, not avoiding, but planning is something very different. If you can plan for your taxes well in advance and submit the returns on time, make the payments on time, you wouldn't fall into any trouble. So it's very important that you comply with all these regulations. End of the day, all these regulations are for our own good. So, as good corporate citizens, if we can do that, we are not only setting an example for the rest of the corporate world, but also setting ourselves up for future success.
So what would be your last words in regards to everything we talked about?
I think it's very important, just to sum up, it's very important that every entrepreneur, every business owner, every non-finance manager understands the basics of finance and accounting, not just to help their businesses to thrive, but also to help themselves to improve in terms of future savings, and those savings yielding future returns, and then not having to rely totally on their full-time job, and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, critical, absolutely critical for anyone to learn the basics of finance and accounting. It may be not my book, but you can even get any other book, any other resource on YouTube. There are so many resources out there. I mean, if you talk about information, I don't think we are living at a time better than this in terms of information overload. But it's important to pick the right information and the resources, and that's where my book comes into play. So if anyone's interested, they could buy it on Amazon. Like I said, it's an Amazon best-selling book. So the title is Accounting Fundamentals: A Non-Finance Manager's Guide to Finance and Accounting. I'm also looking to publish the Audible version of the book in the near future, so please stay tuned. As well as my course, I'm working on a course as well. So if someone's more interested in terms of video and video interactivity, that will be the thing for them. So yeah, this is where I'm at, and I'm happy to help anyone who is interested, who needs assistance in terms of learning finance and accounting. And I'm happy to provide my email address, which goes as info@moneymasterhq.com. And you may also visit the website moneymasterhq.com for further assistance. And I'm here to help you.
Any presence on social media?
Yes, I'm on all the social media platforms, on LinkedIn by Shihan Sheriff, on TikTok as Money Master HQ, on Instagram as well, on the same name, Money Master HQ, and on Facebook as Shihan Sheriff as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Shian, for all the information. I hope everybody found some value in this episode. On that note, thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. My name is Richard.lesperance, and I go by the name of my man Richard. And I was with Shihan Sheriff, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much, Richard.
No problem.